Hi everyone, this is Keith Stone here again with Greg Nagy to talk about the hour 22 and 23 discussion questions. The first of which has to do with whether Socrates believes that he's actually hearing the voice of the daimonion. And the second of which we'll come back to, has to do with the meaning of theorizing for Plato and its relation to theoria, if I remember right. But the hour 22 one first, the daimonion.
Yes, let's tackle that first. I like the responses that the people out there were struggling with, and I struggle with the responses too. It's very hard to reconstruct the belief system of Socrates, the person, since after all, what we're reading in the works of Plato that we do read is a construct of Plato's. It's Plato's Socrates who's saying what he's saying. And of course, Plato tries to be true to the historical Socrates, but he can't help it. He's also, shall we say, pushing his own intellectual and philosophical agenda. That said, I'm persuaded by those who think, on the basis of bits and pieces from the ancient world, that the actual charge leveled against Socrates by the state did somehow involve the word daimonion. That would mean that those of you out there who thought that Socrates is being ironic, I think are on a sensible track. He is somehow, I think, parodying what the state is accusing him of doing. So can we get back to how all of us were trying to come to grips with the word daimon, of which daimonion is a kind of adjective and you could say some kind of diminutive. Okay, daimon is what you say about a god or a hero when you're not sure about the powers of that god or hero. And you're not even sure whether you're making the right connection. So to keep things safe, you say daimon and you don't say theos. And you don't say heros. Although it's more likely you would be saying theos, because even in hero cult, at climactic moments of hero cult, it's okay to default from just saying heros to saying theos. So it's true that Socrates, the way he thinks of superhuman powers, is very inquisitive. He's not necessarily going to go along the path of ancestral ways of thinking about these superhuman powers. So it's handy to think of daimones, I'm using the plural of daimon, rather than theoi. And if he's going around talking like that in public, the state could very easily nail him for not following the protocols of the ancestors, not having the civic patterns of thinking that you would want to be a truly active citizen of the city-state. I think of the word idiotes, which for us means idiot, but for Socrates meant something like a private person who doesn't get involved in public matters, or doesn't get involved in all public matters. So he's being maybe antisocial. That's one of the flavors that is conveyed by the charges against him. And it would prejudice members of the jury, I would think, against Socrates, if Socrates can bring himself to talk about theoi and talks only about daimones. But then it's almost like may I say it this way, a Jiminy Cricket syndrome. And some of us will remember the Walt Disney version of the story of Pinocchio, and there's Jiminy Cricket who says, always let your conscience be your guide. And if we start thinking that way, that there's a Jiminy Cricket within Socrates who is saying, no, you can't do this and you can't do that. And Socrates says, gee, nobody warned me. The daimonion didn't warn me that I was doing something unjust, so I must be doing something just. That kind of thinking, I believe, is glossing over the resonance of the word daimonion as somebody would use it if they're defending their lives in a law court. I would say that whether you call it belief system or whether you call it ancestral ways of thinking about things, because I do worry about using the word belief and believe in this context. Either way, I think Socrates is deliberately playing with traditional wording. It may not be part of the metaphysics of Socrates or Plato for that matter, but after all, his life is at stake, and the continuity, the reception of the philosophy that he is advocating is at stake.
Mm-hmm. Now, Greg, could I ask you about ritual and this idea of what Socrates really believed? We have this idea that it's important to be sincere when you do something in a religious sense, maybe. Could rituals be effective if you didn't, say, believe the right thing, or are the actions what matter?
I remember a term used by the former bishop of Uppsala, Christer Stendahl, who used to teach in the divinity school. And he loved to talk about orthodoxy and orthopraxy. Orthopraxy would be being ritually correct. And there's something very powerful about ritual correctness, because it implies that if you know how to be ritually correct, then you know the ways of the cosmos. Mm-hmm. And so I would say that orthopraxy is what is at stake. And
okay.
That's not to say that proper ritual behavior doesn't also involve proper ritual thinking. But in a sense, the morality comes after the ritual correctness. First, you have to be ritually correct, and then questions of morality, may I say it in the Greek way, questions of justice will come naturally, or so it is assumed.
Right. So maybe if you're not thinking in a ritual correct manner, you also won't practice in a ritual correct manner.
Exactly.
So you can't have one without the other.
Exactly.
This
and
system of thinking.
And I think Christian teaching, especially in the New Testament, is emphasizing so much how you could be ritually correct and brainless, or at least morally incorrect, that we're just assuming that all traditional societies have that, but they don't. I think, for example, of the Indic law code, the law code of Manu, M-A-N-U, and even the name of this founder of the Indic law code, this culture hero, Manu, means the mindful one. And what legitimates him is that he knows how to perform any ritual, any and all rituals. Therefore, he knows how to think properly about superhuman powers. Therefore, he knows what's right and wrong. And that's why he's also the father of the law code. So by virtue of being the father of ritual correctness, he's the father of moral correctness. And I can multiply the examples going from small-scale societies to large-scale societies, such as the Indic experience that I've just described. Certainly, this works for Greek civilization. That's what the Hesiotic Works and Days is all about. Mm-hmm. You do it right, that means you're thinking right.
All right, now it's time for the hour 23 discussion question, which I have right here, and I'll read. How is the theorizing of Socrates, as he engages in dialogue with his followers in the Phaedo, relevant to the theōriā, or sacred voyage of the Athenian ship of state from Athens to Delos and back? That's a great question.
Thank you, and I think we got some great answers, and there'll be more answers responses to come, but I can already work with what people have sent in already. When I say theorizing of Socrates, that part of the question seems like a trick because, in a sense, I'm inviting people to think of that word theorizing in modern terms. Oh, I'm being philosophical, I'm speculating about forms. After all, Plato's Phaedo is like, Plato's Theory of Forms 101. If you want to read what Plato himself thinks concerning his own theory of forms, you read the Phaedo, and a lot of people in the ancient world did, precisely because of that.
I think that I thought of it the way that you just referenced, that Socrates is theorizing, going on his own little mental sacred voyage, while the ship of state is going on its other, more literal
yes,
sacred voyage. But I don't think that's quite right.
Well, in a sense, I love the way you said that, because what I'm pushing for is to say that the theorizing of Socrates is his own sacred voyage, and it can be taken just as seriously in the sense that the mental result of his theorizing is as if he did make a voyage to Delos and back.
Okay.
And that would mean that his use of the word theōriā to mean theory, theorizing, is legitimated. Let's try to think back before Plato and before Socrates even. If you heard the word theōriā, you wouldn't think of philosophy at all. You'd think of sacred voyage of the ship of state, how the community sends out a delegation by sea to the sacred island of Apollo, the god of illumination. Wonderful ritual things happen there, and then the ship of state comes back, and the community, all of it, becomes restored. We're all illuminated.
Does it only apply to the voyage to Delos and back, or does theōriā also refer to going to see Apollo at Delphi, for example?
Oh yes, it can apply to seeing any god in any act of, may I say it this way, pilgrimage. Even the word theōriā, which means an act of visiting by seeing, is almost universally understood to be an initiation. When I say universally understood, what I mean is if you survey the various civilizations of the world, the various cultures of the world, whether they're small scale or large scale, what you find is that when you're making contact with the superhuman powers of your cosmos, the way to do it is to go to the place where they live and see them. Whether the seeing is physical or just mental, but you see them. And I think of the Indic custom of pilgrimage, the Sanskrit word for which is darshana, which means, again, seeing. It's the act of seeing. So the Greeks are not unique, hardly unique, in having a word like theōriā, which means the act of seeing, apply to a voyage of the soul. And if we were studying Native American cultures, we'd call it, anthropologists love to say it this way, we'd call it vision quest. So the community has a vision quest, but I'm saying that Socrates too has a vision quest, and he personalizes it in such a way that, given what he's talking about, like the theory of forms, it's theorizing, all right, in the modern sense of theory, but it's also, and that's really the point of my question, theorizing in the pre-modern sense of go on a sacred voyage in order to see, experience a vision quest. I can say it from the cultural point of view of many different cultures and civilizations, but there it is. It's a religious experience, I'll say it that way, for Socrates and for his followers, just as is, just as it has always been, a religious experience for Athenians, supposedly going all the way back to the days of good King Theseus. So that's there. But the difference is, post-Socrates, theōriā can also mean theory,
Right.
as we understand it.